Before I start this video, make sure to use my TCG Player affiliate link down below in the description. Also, if you do want to support the channel even further, consider becoming a patron. There are some great benefits including giveaways, early access to videos, and can be featured in gameplay videos in the future. For today's patron shoutout, I'd like to thank Tozavel for being a patron. I can't thank you enough for your support, and with that out of the way, let's get into today's video. What's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG, and today I wanted to focus on Massacre Girl, Known Killer. So for 2 and 2 black, she does have Menace and is a human assassin, being a 4/4 body. Creatures you control have Wither, so that does include herself. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, you draw a card. So I'll be quite honest, at first I wasn't too interested in her because I feel like I gravitate more towards 2 to 3 color decks, and so monocolor decks sometimes don't really do it for me. However, Massacre Girl can be pretty powerful, especially getting a lot of card advantage. So first of all, I do want to point out that last ability, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, you draw a card. That does go hand in hand with the Wither ability, or giving -X to another creature. Since their toughness will be equal to 0 after that -X ability, you'll be able to draw a card. So for example, if you do swing in with Massacre Girl, Known Killer, and they block with a 3/3 body on the battlefield, because of the Wither ability, the creature that's blocking Massacre Girl will get 4 -1/-1 counters, making it have 0 toughness in total, and because of that specification of having toughness 1 or less, you will draw a card off of that. So with that ability in mind, I feel like this is going to be a pretty salty commander to play against, because of course with that Wither ability, not many people want to block into it, and if they do, they're going to be making their creatures weaker and weaker until they just die essentially. So with all that in mind, with Massacre Girl, I think this could be a pretty powerful commander in the right type of build. Let's discuss some of the cards you should have in the deck. So first of all, I do want to talk about an aggressive strategy. You really want to put pressure on your opponents, especially their creatures, so that you can get some card draw. I first thought of Orcish Bowmasters. With Massacre Girl's ability, it doesn't specify combat damage specifically, so it's any kind of damage, so Orcish Bowmasters could really take advantage of that. Either when it enters the battlefield, it could deal 1 damage to a target creature, and if it's like a Llanowar Elves, it'll make it a form of -1/-1 counters and draw a card off of that. And the more people are greedy with our card draw, the more we can take advantage of damage and make a big giant threat on the battlefield so that we could swing in and potentially deal some more Wither damage too. Speaking of big scary threats, I did want to mention Phyrexian Obliterator. So I'll be honest, this doesn't really synergize with our commander a whole lot. However, a lot of people don't want to be damaging it because of course of its crazy effect. And plus, when they do block into it, we could just make them sacrifice a lot of permanents. And the main focus of this card, and really the whole entire deck, is I just want to make my opponents make hard decisions when they're using their blockers or when they're swinging in. Even though this doesn't really necessarily synergize with our commander, I feel personally it could really put a lot of pressure on our opponents. Speaking of pressure, I do also want to mention Bloodletter of Aclazotz. So this is just tying into the aggressive nature of this deck. We want to make sure our opponents are losing life, but if they don't want to lose that life, they will have to block into some of our creatures, and of course we do have that Wither ability. So it's either lose a lot of life or lose a creature and we'll have to draw a card. Another aggressive card I did want to mention is Grim Hireling. I feel like this is perfect in the deck. We could potentially get 6 treasures on the battlefield if we swing at each player and connect with them. So this can provide some temporary ramp in the form of treasures, or we could pay into that X ability, sacrifice X creatures, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You only activate it as a sorcery though. So again, because of this ability with Massacre Girl out on the battlefield, we're reducing the toughness to 0, and then with that, we'll draw a card because of the commander. So for me personally, because this is an aggressive deck and we're getting a lot of value out of this, this is a no-brainer. Another advantage piece we could take advantage of is Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. So personally, I find this really interesting in the deck because of course, a lot of people have the decision either to block into our creatures or not to block into our creatures because they will get -1/-1 counters on them. So if we do put a Gix Yawgmoth Praetor on the battlefield, we'll get card advantage regardless. Plus, if we do have a lot of cards off of Massacre Girl or Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, we could pay into that 7 ability by discarding X cards and cast a bunch of cards from our opponent's libraries for free. So either way with Gix, if we connect with an opponent, we get some card advantage, but if they don't want to connect and they want to block with a creature, we could potentially get some card draw off of our commander too, so it's a win-win in my opinion. So with all this card draw, you could absolutely take advantage of Sheoldra the Apocalypse. Not much can be said about this card because it's a multi-format staple card in Modern, also in Standard. It's a pretty expensive card too, so I do understand if you don't want to add to the list, but it has such a powerful ability. We could gain life of all the card draw we do gain with Massacre Girl, and we could also punish our opponents for drawing cards too. I will say with this deck, a lot of creatures are probably not going to stick on the board for long because of that Wither ability, so why not help your opponents out by giving them some more creatures? So for example, Forbidden Orchard, I know technically we are in a mono black deck, so having that 1 mana of any color is not really going to make a big difference, but I do like it for the fact that we could give our opponent a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token whenever we do tap it. So this is more to take advantage of those little creatures we do give to our opponents. This is a constant way to do so each turn. They might not block with it, or they might, who knows. But remember, it's whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness is less than 1, you draw a card. So whether or not we attack into that person or not, it really just has to die. We don't have to worry about killing it. Our opponents can do the work for us too. Another creature I did think about was Slaughter Specialist. I feel like this is a great card in the deck because of course when it does enter the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 white humans creature token, and whenever a creature an opponent dies, you put a 1/1 counter on Slaughter Specialist. So each opponent will make a 1/1, and most likely they will either chump with it and we could draw a card with our commander, or they might make use of it by sacrificing it some sort of way, but either way, we'll get the card draw out of that 1/1 creature token on the battlefield. Plus, with the more creatures dying on the battlefield, the bigger the threat Slaughter Specialist can become. The same can be said for Hunted Bone Brute. So for 3 mana when it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2 1/1 dog creature tokens, and it does have that nice clause whenever it does die, each opponent loses 3 life. Also, by the way, just for 3 mana, it is a menace 6/2. So this could potentially swing in and potentially get rid of 2 target threats because of the 6 power, and also having menace, 2 creatures have to block it, and also with a Wither ability we can potentially draw 2 cards. So for 3 mana this is doing a lot for us. And the last card that donates creatures to your opponents is Clackbridge Troll. So it does have trample and haste. When it does enter the battlefield, target opponent will create 3 0/1 white go creature token. At the beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If a player does, you tap Clackbridge Troll and you gain 3 life and draw a card. So this one I feel is the best one out of the other options because for one, this is card draw itself, but if somebody sacrifices that goat token because it has toughness less than 1, you could draw a card off of our commander, but also draw a card off of the Clackbridge Troll and gain 3 life. So get 2 cards and gain 3 life. This is a great advantage engine. Plus, if nobody decides to sacrifice anything, it's just going to be an 8/8 trample haste body swinging towards their way. But I do want to go on to the next topic, and that's keeping the counters coming one way or another, whether you want to use it with Spitting Dilophosaurus. I feel like this is a great ability. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you put a -1/-1 counter on one target creature. We don't want to just focus on our creatures doing the -1/-1 counters. We have a lot of options that we can take advantage of so that we can really pile on those counters. Plus, we could essentially give unblockable to all of our creatures if all the creatures our opponents control have -1/-1 counters. So again, this is a great card in the deck. Also, when I saw Massacre Girl, I got super excited and I thought of Archfiend of Ifnir. I feel like this is going to be a recurring board wipe on the board. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, you put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. I'm thinking of the scenario that will probably happen in most games where if you have Massacre Girl out on the battlefield and if you have Archfiend of Ifnir on the battlefield, let's just say for example in combat 5 creatures died with toughness less than 1, then you draw 5 cards, and let's just say you have 12 cards in your hand. You go to your discard step, you have to discard 5 cards, and because you discarded 5 cards, Archfiend of Ifnir will trigger. Then you'll put 5 -1/-1 counters on each creature your opponents control. So depending on the board state in that scenario, you can potentially draw a lot more cards. So I feel like Archfiend of Ifnir can be a recurring board wipe in the deck. You can also take advantage of Proliferate. So obviously with Proliferate, it has that ability to choose any number of permanents and or players, give them another counter of each kind they already have on there. So with -1/-1 counters, you'll put an additional one on there with Karn's Bastion. So I feel like Karn's Bastion is a very good choice because it just taps for colorless, and so obviously that's not a big deal because we are in mono black. I would be more worried if we were in like 3 or 4 more colors. I also think we could really take advantage of Yawgmoth Thran Physician. It's doing a couple things we want to be doing in this deck, putting -1/-1 counters on target creature and also drawing a card. We have to sacrifice a creature in order to do that, but that's a small price to pay. But most importantly, we could pay 2 black mana and discard a card and Proliferate. That last ability will be brutal in this deck because of course if we do have a lot of card advantage with our commander and there's a lot of creatures on the battlefield with -1/-1 counters, counters. Say hypothetically there's 5 creatures on the battlefield that have -1/-1 counters. We could consistently pay into that black ability, discard a card, and then proliferate and potentially draw 5 cards when they do all die. Of course, I would do this personally if you are in a grindier situation. If you're looking for answers to remove a specific board piece, you could discard a card and then proliferate to keep finding pieces and especially removing creatures on the battlefield. So this has multi-purpose, obviously. One more proliferate option I did want to mention is Vraska Betrayal Stink, because of course it does have that +0 ability. You may draw a card and you lose 1 life and you proliferate. So card advantage and proliferating, what more do you want? Plus it does act as removal with that -2 ability, making a creature into a treasure artifact, or it could be a potential win con with that -9 ability. In this deck, I also want to focus on death and reanimation. We want to make sure our opponent's creatures are dying, so ways that we can take advantage of that is by using the original Massacre Girl, Massacre Worm, and also Toxic Deluge. These really do act as great board wipes, not in the form of destroying creatures of course, but by reducing the toughness of all creatures on the battlefield. I really like Massacre Worm, however, because whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life, so not only are we drawing cards with our commander, but we're also punishing our opponents as well. Toxic Deluge, we can control the amount of -1/-1 all creatures get based off of how much life we do have. And of course we do have to add the OG Massacre Girl. Obviously it synergizes with the commander a lot, acting as a board wipe on the battlefield. So of course all 3 of these are great includes in the deck, no question about it. But I did also want to mention Blood Artist and Vein Ripper. I wanted to highlight these specifically. I know there's a lot of Blood Artist, Zulapur Cutthroat effects, but I wanted to focus on whenever another creature dies, so any opponents too. Mainly because we don't really want our creatures dying, we want our opponent's creatures dying. We could gain some life and also make opponents lose some life off of these two. I know a lot of people have been crapping on Vein Ripper, but I actually think it's very good. 6 mana, I know seems like a lot for this effect, but remember it has a lot of things going for it. A 6/5 body, flying ward, sacrifice a creature, and whenever a creature dies, an opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Also, what's very neat about this card, it looks like it's inspired off of Jack the Ripper. I'm not 100% sure, but based off of the flavor text, I don't know. I just love this card a lot, and I'm going to be putting in many sacrifice decks. I did also want to focus on Drivnod Carnage Dominus. This is an excellent card in the deck because if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So not only does this double up on Blood Artist effects like I mentioned previously, this will also double up our commander's ability of drawing an extra card. So I feel like this would slot perfectly in the deck too. Because a lot of creatures are dying on our opponent's side of the battlefield, why not take them? We could use Breach the Multiverse to do the job. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control, and each creature you control has become a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. But of course, what we really want to focus in on is getting the biggest and scariest threats from our opponent's graveyards. But why stop there? Let's get all the creatures from all graveyards to our battlefield with Rise of the Dark Realms. This is a late game finisher that really could take advantage of our commander because of course we're making all our opponent's creatures die left and right. Why not convince our opponent's creatures from the graveyard to join our side? Another similar card I do want to mention is Shieldred, and the backside, the True Scriptures. She has some decent stats for 5 mana. She has Menace, being a 4/5 body. When she enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. Also, you can flip her into the backside for the True Scriptures. For the first lore chapter, you destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. The second lore chapter, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. The third lore chapter, you put all creatures from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, and then you exile the True Scriptures and return it back as Shieldred, and you will get that ETB when it comes back on the battlefield. So Shieldred really does a lot for us. I feel like this is a great card in the deck. Of course, it acts as removal, then more removal, then we mill some cards into the graveyard and have a big finish, putting all creature cards from graveyards onto the battlefield under our control. Yeah, this is going to be an excellent pick, no question about it. And for me, I feel like these theft items is really perfect for the deck because of course we have a lot of creatures dying on our opponent's side of the battlefield. Why not reanimate them so that we could just take advantage of them even further? However, with all that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Massacre Girl Known Killer. I will be quite honest though, I wasn't too impressed with this card. I felt like, okay, it's just another mono black card that does the thing, but honestly, the more I brewed around it, the more I made the video around this specific card, I actually found it pretty enjoyable, and I feel like this can be a pretty powerful commander in the right type of situation. Of course, I feel like a lot of people might hate this out, but again, I feel like in the right type of strategy, in the right type of build, this can be very powerful and maybe a little salt-inducing because of course this does focus on you removing your opponent's creatures. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Massacre Girl? Do you plan on building around her? I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions. I feel like this really can be a great commander, but also a great card in the 99 for a lot of decks. The first thought I did think about was like the Scorpion God. I also thought of Toxrill the Corrosive. But one thing I usually say in my videos is you want to have card draw in the command zone, and Massacre Girl definitely does that. So with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.